I, a 45-year-old male, was married to my wife, a 39-year-old female, for just 6 years. When we dated, she fell hard for me. I was, and still am, a pilot. Through my company, I get flight privileges and free tickets to anywhere. My wife also had a premium account since she flew with me on several occasions. Within the time we were dating and married, we went to 8 different countries. As an extravagant birthday present to one of her friends, my wife hosted a girls-only trip to Paris. She was living the life without having to work at all. I think this life of luxury, thanks to me, made it easier for her to bash her ex-husband all the time and continually express how glad she was to be rid of him. He was actually the one who filed for divorce against her, but that's just one of the things my wife lied to me about. I noticed that my wife was still connected to her ex via social media. I figured she wanted him to see her updates about how great our life was together. I didn't really care. That was the only thing I noticed. Before several of my flights were canceled because 3 of the airline's planes needed inspection before their next flight, I decided not to tell my wife I was coming home early to see what she was doing with her day. Since she didn't have a job, I was surprised to find 2 cars in our driveway. When I entered the home, I didn't hear anything. I went upstairs, and that's when I heard noises. I felt something overtake me. Knowing my wife was in our bedroom with another person, the door was locked, so I grabbed a hammer from the hallway closet. I bashed around the doorknob as my wife screamed until the door swung open. They were bug-eyed in bed, completely uncomfortable and scared for their lives. She was in our bed with her ex-husband, the one she so boldly bashed. I screamed names at her and at God. I told her she was a liar, and I told him he was exactly the piece of crap my wife said he was. He got dressed quickly and left. I wish I knew what he was thinking, entering my home to sleep with his ex. He must have been a stupid idiot, and he's lucky I'm not a fighter. My wife then tried to touch my shoulder while holding the sheet around her and asked me not to do anything rash. I pulled away and said I was kicking her out of the house. I told her I wouldn't consider repairing this relationship, even if she was the last girl on earth. She was sobbing but did her best to act like she could handle me dumping her. She started packing her bags. In another room, I called her mother and told her everything. In turn, she told her father and the rest of her family. My wife left in her car without knowing that everyone knew what she had done. She went to her AP's house, where she checked her phone for any messages from me. She found none, but she did find a ton of messages from her family. They were scolding her for cheating on me, the greatest thing to ever happen in her life. They called me an honorable provider and said she was, for what she did. It was clear that they felt she should have left her ex in the past, and they wouldn't be supportive of her after this. She left a voicemail for me, saying I ruined her life by refusing to forgive her. She decided to leave the country with her AP. So, with their bags packed, they went to the airport. At the ticket counter, my wife tried to swipe the platinum flight card I provided for her, but it failed to go through since I had it canceled just 30 minutes earlier. She then immediately called me, telling me that her card was not working anymore and that a P was no longer interested in flying with her. I guess he had a sudden change of heart about their spontaneous rekindling. Without any other options, my wife left the airport security office alone, in her car, packed full of luggage, for her parents' house. She begged either of them to let her move back in, but they only stared at her with disappointment and turned her away. They couldn't resist letting her move back. And after she was homeless for a few nights, her mother couldn't believe her daughter did this after bashing her ex so much. So she called me. I told her everything that happened, how I felt, and how my ex thought I was wrong for failing to forgive her. With that, her mother told me she wanted to kick her out and asked how I felt about the idea. I told her to do it because my wife foolishly thought she could start a new life with her AP after telling me what a terrible person he was. After vowing her commitment and love to me, she shouldn't get handouts from anyone. Look at what my spoiling did to her. Her head blew up with entitlement, without any respect towards me, even though I was the one that allowed her to think this way. Her mother was convinced and kicked her out that same night. It's been 2 years, and my ex has since found herself and her daughter a low-income apartment in a drug habit. Now let's get into today's second story. I, a 27-year-old male, trusted my wife, a 27-year-old female, with all my heart. We were high school sweethearts who married with our parents' approval. She never lied and proved herself trustworthy to me and my family on many occasions. I grew up with my stepfather, so I trusted his judgment as well as my mother's. That's what makes my story so painful. Our 7th wedding anniversary passed while I was overseas serving the country as a U.S. soldier. I had to spend much of my time away from home, but my wife knew of my military aspirations before we got married. She stayed at home, making about $100 a month with her knitting projects. She was supportive of me, took excellent care of our home, and always made amazing reunion love with me when I returned home. However, this time when I arrived home after a 10-month deployment, something was terribly wrong. I hadn't heard from my mother, stepfather, or wife for a few months. Actually, I did hear from my mother, but it was always kept short, and she was very vague when it came to how my stepfather or wife were. She only said she didn't know why my wife wouldn't talk to me, but told me that whatever it was, I could get through it. That was the closest I got to any warning about what was going on. My wife looked sick and nervous when I walked through our front door, and she was wearing a huge t-shirt. I immediately went to hug her and felt her try to resist before I pulled her against me. I could feel a hard bump in her stomach pressing against me. Within a fraction of a second, I knew she was pregnant, and I knew I wasn't the father. I yanked her shirt up to reveal her mid-sized baby bump, and a scream came out of my mouth. She immediately broke down crying after hearing my scream and admitted that my stepfather forced himself on her. It was too much for me to process. As I got into the car, I heard her begging me not to tell anyone about it. That was an extremely odd request after telling me he forced her to become pregnant. I practically broke into my parents' house to find my mom sitting knowingly in the living room with her hands folded on her lap. She stood up and gave me a long hug where I just cried. She told me she knew about the baby already and filed for divorce against my stepfather. I asked her if their affair was consensual, and she was certain it was. She found messages between them on AP's phone. I just took the day with my mother to grieve over this life-changing mistake each of our spouses made. My stepfather was the worst human being on earth. He betrayed me, the boy he raised as his own child, the boy he taught how to be a man, by knocking out my wife while I fought as a soldier. Throughout the time I stayed with my mother and processed everything, my soon-to-be ex-wife continued texting and calling me, begging me to forgive her and help her pay for an abortion. She couldn't afford to live without me, which meant her fate was completely in my hands. I told her even if she got an abortion, this wouldn't be something I could just forgive and forget. She begged me to at least get her an abortion, even if I didn't want to stay with her. I told her to ask my stepfather for the money, or better yet, earn the money for an abortion by knitting her butt off as the fetus grows. I told her family about her predicament, but they already knew and told her they would have nothing to do with her or the child. She would have to face these consequences alone since she proved herself to be a self-centered hara. I just laughed. Without any help from anyone in the court order for her to vacate the house, she was losing her mind. She had no skills besides her knitting and knew finding a steady job would be impossible for her, especially without a home address. Meanwhile, the baby keeps growing. She left voicemails and texts for me, saying she couldn't bear the thought of losing me. Her husband, her strong, brave, proud hero. She continued blowing up my phone until I had no choice but to block her across all platforms. That was the last I heard of her. My stepfather has not spoken to me since all this happened. He doesn't talk to any of our family, even though he was a part of it for 25 years. It really is like he dropped off the face of the earth and proved that he was the terrible person he proved himself to be. He doesn't care about me or his unborn child, which is what bothers me the most. All I know is that after this experience, I vowed to be the best father I can be to any children that enter my life. I already try my best to be the best husband I could be, but it didn't matter when I was apart from my wife. I'm done with my military service now and started dating a new woman. A moment that felt like the beginning of something truly special. It was a casual get-together filled with laughter and music. I couldn't help but notice her from across the room. Her beauty was impossible to ignore. She was the kind of woman who could captivate anyone with a simple smile. The night was in full swing, and I knew I had to find a way to get to know her better. Luckily, our mutual friend was more than happy to help. She was a fantastic wingwoman, and I asked her if she could introduce us. She agreed and guided me towards her. My heart raced as we approached, and I stumbled over my words, but she was gracious and warm, making it easy for me to strike up a conversation. Our initial conversation was filled with light-hearted topics, ranging from our favorite movies to our travel experiences. She had a radiant personality, and it didn't take long for us to find ourselves immersed in deep discussions about our dreams, fears, and life's greatest adventures. I was entranced by her intelligence, and her sense of humor was a perfect match for mine. As the night went on, we exchanged contact information, and I couldn't help but send her a text as soon as I left the party. The messages quickly grew more intimate, revealing our shared desires and aspirations. We were already deeply infatuated with each other, but there was a moment of reckoning when she told me about her recent loss. Her husband had passed away just 6 months ago, and she had a 3-year-old son. I was stunned by the news, and for a moment, uncertainty clouded my mind. I had always heard that getting involved with a single mom could be complicated, but her situation was unique. She had been married and had lost her husband, leaving her to navigate life as a single mother. Her beauty and the connection we shared were too precious to let slip away, so I decided to continue our flirtatious conversations. We eventually decided to go on a date, which felt like the next logical step in our blossoming relationship. After our date, I took her home for the night, and that's when our friends with benefits arrangement began. We both craved each other's company, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. Months passed, and our bond continued to deepen. We decided to officially become a couple, despite the complexities of her situation. I felt a connection not only with her but also with her son. It was as if I was meant to step into the role her late husband had left behind, a thought that seemed absurd but felt strangely right at the time. As we got to know each other's families, we attended family events together, making introductions and weaving our lives together. I felt welcomed in her family, and she in mine. Our connection grew stronger with every passing day. I got to know her son, and my affection for him grew, making me feel even more connected to her. In the midst of it all, I thought that I had found a woman who possessed all the qualities of a traditional wife: caring, loving, and nurturing. Our love story was far from conventional, but it was uniquely ours, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. My life was a whirlwind of responsibilities. I was a part owner of my business, which meant long hours and significant travel, consuming nearly 30% of my time. Socializing had taken a backseat, and that's how I found myself in a relationship with her. I didn't have the luxury of dating often, so when I found a beautiful woman like her, I felt compelled to make her mine, believing that I couldn't do better. She worked as a receptionist at an accounting firm, making significantly less than me, and I didn't hesitate to shower her and her son with gifts and cover her rent when she struggled to make ends meet. It was a challenging situation at times, but I was more than willing to support her. After a year of dating, I thought she checked all the boxes of what I wanted in a partner. With no hesitation, I decided to propose to her, and it was a moment of pure joy. Prior to our marriage, I had purchased a house in my name, and as I co-own a business with my partners, it was necessary for each of us to sign a robust prenuptial agreement to safeguard our business interests. She willingly signed the prenup, and we subsequently tied the knot. After our marriage, she expressed a desire for me to adopt her son, and I willingly agreed to do so. After 2 years of being married, I saw no issue with this arrangement, given the strong bond I had formed with the child. Our wedding day was a dream come true, and I believed she was the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. But as soon as we said our vows and moved in together, something changed. It became evident that living together brought about a shift in her behavior. Perhaps it was easier for her to make excuses when she lived alone with her son. But now that she was under the same roof as me, the excuses no longer held up. Our once vibrant sex life began to wither, and it seemed I was having more intimacy when she wasn't living with me than when she was. The initial joy of our marriage had started to give way to doubt and uncertainty, leaving me in a state of confusion and concern about our future. She began exhibiting classic signs of what I now know as infidelity, and it became increasingly difficult to ignore. She would hide her phone, coming home late when she was supposed to be there, and not answering her phone when she was out. To make matters worse, she started leaving her son with me when she went out with her so-called friends, dumping the responsibility on me. I found her behavior highly unusual, especially so early in our marriage. It made me question whether this was the true color of the person I had married. Following our marriage, I believed that she would find contentment now being with someone financially stable, a loving father figure to her son, and a stable presence in her life. Despite my reservations, I chose to have a sincere conversation with her in the hopes of helping her see reason. She acknowledged her shortcomings and made a promise to change, providing me with a glimmer of hope. In the following months, everything seemed to be improving, and I held on to the belief that we could overcome these challenges together. But one day, as I was supposed to drive 4 hours to see a client in another city, I received a notification that his flight had been delayed by a few hours. Seizing the opportunity to freshen up and grab some much-needed sleep before hitting the road, I rushed back home. When I arrived at my house, I opened the garage door and was greeted by the sight of my wife's car in the garage. My initial thought was that she must be sick, as she was supposed to be at work. But as I stepped into the living room, I noticed something was amiss. My beloved lazy-boy chair and the table next to it were pushed out of position, and I was certain they hadn't been that way when I left home that morning. Confusion quickly turned into concern, and my heart pounded as I made my way to the bedroom. There I saw my wife lying on the bed, seemingly pretending to be asleep. The atmosphere in the room was heavy with tension, and there was an unmistakable scent of intimacy lingering in the air. It didn't take long for me to piece everything together. The displaced furniture, her unexpected presence at home when she should have been at work, and the telltale aroma in the room. I knew in that moment that she had just been with another man in our house, and I had almost caught her in the act. My emotions were a tumultuous mix of devastation, anger, and disbelief. She continued to feign sleep as I stood there, seething with a storm of emotions. Although I felt the urge to confront her with the intensity of my emotions, I forced myself to remain calm. I approached her and gently asked if she was okay. She opened her eyes and mumbled about having a headache. As I looked under the covers, I noticed that she had nothing on, a highly unusual occurrence for her, which further intensified my suspicions. Fearing that the other man might still be in the room, I began to scan my surroundings, though I was fairly certain he had made a hasty exit when I opened the garage door. My wife, on the other hand, seemed oddly curious about my actions, repeatedly asking me who and what I was looking for. Her nervousness only served to further convince me that she was aware of my suspicions and had been caught in a compromising situation. As my wife excused herself to the bathroom, I sat on the bed, my heart heavy with the weight of the undeniable truth. For some reason, I decided to pull back the covers on the bed, and my eyes fell on an unmistakable stain. One that revealed the painful reality of what had transpired. It was an X stain on our bed, a cruel reminder of infidelity right in our matrimonial bed. The shock and devastation that coursed through me were overwhelming, and I struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. Years of experience as a salesman had taught me patience and how to remain composed in the face of adversity. Despite the overwhelming heartbreak I felt, I knew that revealing my emotions wouldn't help the situation. At that moment, I understood that I had been played. The woman I had believed to be my loving wife had never truly cared for me. She had been using me for her own desires and pleasure. Then she emerged from the bathroom, casually combing her hair with a towel, and inquired why I was home early. Just moments before, she had been feigning illness with a headache, and now she strolled around the room, acting as though nothing had happened. Her audacity left me speechless, considering that I had nearly caught her in an act of infidelity in our marital bed, while she was supposed to be at work. I couldn't bring myself to respond to her questions. Instead, I got up and walked away, with her trailing behind me, persistently asking me what I was doing in our own home. I knew that I couldn't accuse her of anything without concrete evidence, as previous arguments with her had taught me that confrontation led nowhere unless I had undeniable proof. The enormity of the situation weighed on my shoulders as I grappled with the harsh reality that my marriage had unraveled in the most painful and unexpected way. After the unsettling encounter at home, my wife seemed aware of my anger but remained oblivious to its cause. I climbed into my car, rejoining the road with a heavy heart and a racing mind. The 4-hour drive back was the shortest I'd ever experienced as I was consumed by my thoughts and emotions. I decided that I needed to gain some clarity on my wife's actions. So I resolved to install a GPS tracker in her car to monitor her movements when I was at home and when I was away on business trips. As a growing sense of distrust festered, I knew she was hiding something from me. To complicate matters further, when I arrived in the town to meet my client, I received a text message from my wife expressing her anger that I had left home. In a silent fury, I saw through her attempt to use reverse psychology on me, and the realization only fueled my own frustration and suspicion. Determined to uncover the truth, I ordered a GPS tracker and had it discreetly installed in her car during the night. As I monitored her movements, I noticed a pattern. On occasion, she would drive home from work during her lunch hours, spending 2 to 3 hours at home before returning to work. This behavior raised questions, as it seemed unusual for someone with a full-time job. I also observed that while I was at home taking care of her son, she would sometimes drive to a hotel when she claimed to be going to see her friends. Each new piece of information added to the growing unease and left me feeling trapped in a web of deception and betrayal, uncertain of what the future held for our troubled marriage. In that moment, the weight of betrayal pressed down on me like an unbearable burden. I had been faithfully babysitting her son, caring for him as if he were my own, completely unaware of the painful truth that lay beneath the surface. The revelations that my wife was headed to the same hotel I had observed her frequent with her affair partner shattered the last remaining fragments of trust I had in her. My emotions were in turmoil, the sense of being deceived, the sinking feeling of abandonment, and the relentless shock that she had been carrying on an affair underneath my roof sent me spiraling into an unstable emotional state. I couldn't believe how deep her deceit ran, how she had brought her affair partner into my home, into the life of the child I had grown attached to. On that fateful day, as she announced her plans to meet her friend at the same hotel, I felt an overwhelming need to confront her. With her son by my side, I set off to track her down. I had a rough estimate of when she would be back home, so I took her son with me to the hotel, positioned ourselves in the lobby, and waited anxiously for her and her affair partner to emerge. Though the thought crossed my mind that they might take an alternate exit through the back door of the hotel, I brushed it aside. I was consumed by a mixture of anger, hurt, and the need to confront the lies that had been festering. She had underestimated me and believed she could get away with her infidelity, even going so far as to bring her affair partner into our home. The tension in the lobby seemed to stretch on for an eternity as I paced back and forth, carrying her son and awaiting their emergence. The moment I saw her and her affair partner walking out, the shock on their faces was palpable. Her expression was a mix of fear and disbelief, as if she had seen a ghost. Without thinking, I walked up to her affair partner, whom I now knew was her married boss, and handed him her son. It was a spontaneous decision, one I hadn't even thought through entirely. I knew of his marital status because they had posted work-related pictures on social media, and I had seen his family. I told him that her son was now his responsibility. Then I turned to her, my voice filled with anger and finality, and told her never to come back home. The shock on their faces intensified as they stood there, her boss still holding her son, frozen in disbelief. With that, I left the hotel lobby and headed to my car, leaving them behind in a state of stunned silence. Leaving the hotel parking lot without her son and his baby seat still in my car was one of the most challenging moments of that day. A part of me contemplated returning to give them the essentials, thinking that perhaps they didn't have anything for the child. But the determination to stand my ground and maintain the decisiveness of my actions won out. There was no turning back now. I was resolute in my decision. I proceeded to a home improvement store, Home Depot, where I purchased new locks. As I was driving, my phone rang, and I saw her number on the caller ID. She was crying and begging for a chance to explain and make amends. Part of me knew I shouldn't have answered, but I wanted her to feel the impact of my anger, so I decided to take the call. In that conversation, I let loose all the pent-up frustrations and resentment I had been harboring. I insulted her, berating her for the deception, for marrying me seemingly for financial stability, and for using me to care for her son while carrying on an affair with her boss. I held nothing back, letting her know the depths of my hurt and betrayal. She pleaded with me, emphasizing the boy's well-being and the fact that his belongings were still in our house. I retorted cold and unyielding, telling her that she could come to pick up the boy's things. She expressed that she had nowhere to go, to which I replied, "I don't care." I gathered all the items I thought the boy might need and placed them at the front door, a silent testament to the end of our relationship. She arrived and knocked on the door, only to discover that I had indeed changed the locks and she couldn't enter. I upheld my decision, and she realized that I wasn't playing games. In the end, I decided not to send her things to her boss's house, but instead allowed her to come and pick up her belongings. The aftermath of the tumultuous events in my marriage brought about a whirlwind of change. While I hadn't intended to involve her boss's wife, a surge of anger and betrayal had led me to reach out on Facebook and divulge everything. In just 1 week, the consequences of her actions unfolded. She lost her job and found herself without a place to live, staying with a relative. The most challenging part of this entire ordeal was the effect it had on the boy, who was entirely innocent in this situation. I had grown to love him like a son, and I couldn't help but feel heartbroken that our relationship had been abruptly severed. Life is never easy, and I knew the emotional detachment would be a struggle for both of us. In the midst of the chaos, her boss's wife decided to work on her marriage. She was a stay-at-home mom with no financial support. My wayward wife's boss severed all contact with her. The divorce proceedings further highlighted her isolation in this difficult situation, and she faced the challenges of rebuilding her life independently. Thanks to the prenuptial agreement my business partners insisted on, I was able to walk away from the marriage without any financial entanglements, leaving behind a past that was tainted by betrayal and deceit. The entire experience was transformative, changing my outlook on life and relationships. I had once imagined a future filled with marriage and children, but now I was learning to adapt to life as it came, carrying with me the lessons and scars of the past. About 25 years ago, I was in the military and was on a 2-year assignment from where my 38-year-old wife and I lived. We'd been married about 20 years at that point, so I only came home on the weekends. After the first year, my wife started telling me to just stay there and not come home until my assignment finally ended. I refused. She started treating me very coldly and not wanting to be intimate on those weekends. Then, after another 3 or 4 months, she started randomly accusing me of cheating on her and continued being cold towards me. My remote assignment ended, and I was given orders overseas for 3 years. I started preparing to rent out our house and move my wife and teenage sons. My wife constantly fought with me about it, saying she did not want to go and that I should go by myself. Also, during this transition, she was still cold and distant. My kids wanted to go, so she finally agreed to go. Once we got to the new location, she started constantly finding fault with everything, with me and the location. So, after 6 months there, I received permission to move her and my kids back home. At the end of the year, the next 6 months were cordial at best. She was still cold, but we had some intimacy about once a week. As the end of the year drew closer, she became excited about moving back and withdrew from me again. She stayed withdrawn from me for the last month or so. I took a 2-week leave about a week after she departed with the kids and went back home to help out. After about 3 hours of arriving, she was telling me to just leave and go back to my base. I stayed for about 10 days and returned to my base overseas. I was there for another 2.5 years. I would go home about every 4 months for 10 days and be treated the same way as I was the first time. We would be intimate twice in those 10 days. But I got a feeling she was doing it out of a feeling of obligation rather than desire. Also, she acted as if she wasn't really happy I was there and even stated she would like it better if I did not come back home until my time overseas was finished. For that remaining 1.5 years, she remained cold and distant when I visited, and whenever I would call her to see if all was okay. If I mentioned I had gone to a cookout or bowling, she would accuse me of cheating and hang up. She would also constantly tell me everything was my fault. I was always in her way of doing what she wanted. After I finally got transferred back, the coldness and distance remained. After 6 months back, I moved out. I stayed gone and even told her that if it is the way she was going to be, I wanted a divorce. So, she agreed to marriage counseling. We went, but it was mostly a joke. She blamed her coldness and distance on me for not understanding her or what she wanted. So, I moved back home and just ignored it from then on. I left the military and got a job that required constant traveling. Now, 25 years later, we are both in our 60s and retired. I have a lot of time on my hands now and time for self-reflection. Hindsight is almost always 20/20. Now I question her actions as I look back and analyze them using various articles I've read from people who analyze cheating spouses. My wife's actions back then fit the pattern given by other cheaters. Even though I don't have proof, over the years since then, some of her friends and previous co-workers have made snide remarks about her possibly cheating during get-togethers while the alcohol flowed. I have mentioned it to her a few times. She never denies what they say but responds by questioning their honesty or that they were probably doing it themselves. We still have an occasional blow-up. A few times, I have been so emotionally drained by always being who she lashes out at that I leave for a few hours just to get my composure back. When I come back, I tell her that I will leave if that is what she wants. Then she immediately states that she never cheated on me and has always been faithful. To recap, 25 years ago, my wife exhibited the cheating telltale symptoms listed by many professionals in the marriage counseling field. She pushed her spouse away, became distant, constantly found fault with her spouse, constantly denied cheating even though never accused of it, and constantly accused her remote spouse of cheating. Also, she constantly worked overtime on the weekends at her company, even though no one else did except her boss. This occurred for about 3 years. Now, to my question or dilemma. We've been married for 45 years now. I am now questioning our entire married years. I can't bury it in the back of my mind anymore. Should I leave this sleeping dog alone, or should I discuss it all with her and probably tear our marriage apart? A few of her co-workers also remain around. They were also her friends. I have to be really careful because they stay in touch on Facebook, so I know a couple of the husbands and will possibly try to talk with them. The 2 oldest kids are already out of the house. The youngest lived in the video game world and never paid much attention to her comings and goings. But I will talk with them for a little update. So, I tried to reach out to someone and was very careful in what I said. His wife immediately called my wife, asking why we were separated and other BS. I'm glad I did not actually ask my real questions. This tells me I can't just confront her directly and try to get her to believe I actually know something and not just suspicion. I need to get my physical living accommodations set up here in the US first. Next update. It has been a while since my original post and short update. I might have posted an update after the ones on the original post. So, I confronted her. She denied what happened and kept asking who told me. She then just brushed it off as whoever it must just be jealous of her. Even after I itemized her behavior back then in detail, she just continued to deny it. Then she started accusing me of not being nice back then and that I hurt her by not trusting her. She also kept wiping non-existent tears. As soon as I backed off, she just started saying that I had bad communication with her since then. I tried to get past it and took her on a Caribbean cruise. But I just don't have those loving feelings at this point. I don't wish her any misfortune but just want to leave her now. My oldest son and his family decided to get ancestry DNA tests. They also told me that the wife and I should, so I did, and I had my youngest do it also. Turns out that my oldest son and my youngest son are only half-brothers. The DNA test also shows that my oldest son is not my biological son but my youngest is. I never suspected this. My wife was pregnant for about a month before we met. 2.5 months into our relationship, she told me she was pregnant. I was 19, so I assumed it was mine. I was quite naive and stupid then. So, my upbringing and my infatuation convinced me that I needed to marry her. I ended up raising 2 kids that weren't mine. She had a 4-month-old when we met and one that was. I love the 2 oldest just as much as my youngest. And that will never change. I have not told the wife about this yet. I need to discuss it with my oldest son and then all 3 of them. Then I will also inform them that I'm divorcing their mother. The 2 oldest will have to ask her who their biological father is because I have no clue. Then I will video chat with her and inform her of everything and my intentions to file. I strongly feel there was an emotional affair and a physical affair that happened 25 to 30 years ago. I most likely will never know for sure. What I do know, though, is that my oldest son is not mine. Final update. At the end of my last update, I was going to tell my kids the truth and then the wife. I told my kids 5 days ago. It was pretty tough. All of my kids took it pretty well, but I think my oldest son may still be processing it. I do not know if their biological dads are the same individual or 2 different men, so the oldest child will get a DNA test also. I told both of them to ask their mom. Hopefully, she will remember and tell them. I decided to just text my wife instead of video chat. After 40+ years, I knew that would be badly. I would probably lose my composure and blow up, which wouldn't have helped. Also, I'm pretty emotional over this. The text was short and to the point. The DNA test showed the oldest child is not mine and is only a half-sibling to the youngest. I stated I did not accept being lied to for 40+ years, that the marriage was over and that I would be filing for divorce. She replied shortly after that. I did not respond to any of her texts. First, it was a misunderstanding about her lying to me and that she did not know. Then it was just us having bad communication. Then she was sorry that I had so much hate for her and said she would sign the papers and hoped I would find someone that makes me happy. Next, she started blaming me for everything and said that I never cared and trusted her. All of her texting was over the span of about 2 days. I texted her that I would only text her regarding the kids, grandkids, and the divorce from now on. I included the financial support she will get. She asked if I would just send all of her belongings to her. Since then, it has been dead silence from her. She has contacted the 2 oldest about everything. I have not done the paperwork yet, but will do it shortly. I caught my wife cheating a second time. I was married to my wife, Betty, for 6 years. I travel for work several times a year for training and support. I never had any reason to suspect her of cheating until last year. Then, I started seeing signs like her being out more, buying new clothes and being overly protective of her phone. When I would ask her questions, she would give me vague and evasive answers. Also, our sex life wasn't as good as it used to be. I had a couple of conversations with her, and she assured me we were fine and that she was just focusing on improving herself. Still not satisfied, I cloned her iPhone to my iPad, and I was able to read her texts and emails, including a bunch she had tried to delete. It was so much worse than I thought. She was talking with several guys and had slept with most of them. I took screenshots of everything, including pictures they had traded. She was meeting them at our house when I was out of town on business. I spent a whole day at work just rereading everything and trying to make sense of it. I had another trip planned that month, and all I could think about was what was going to happen while I was gone. The next day, I made a plan to confront her, but I wanted more evidence so she couldn't deny it and say I was delusional. So, I rigged up 2 IP cameras, one in the living room and another in our bedroom, and hooked them to my NAS box. When I got back from my trip, I had more than I bargained for. She had 2 different guys over while I was gone, and what really floored me was seeing her enjoying acts with them that she never would do with me. I did a deep dive and found out all the personal info on the guy she was talking to. Both of the guys on the video are married. One is even a deacon at our church. I had another trip a week later, and got more videos with a 3rd guy. I was home for about 3 weeks straight and kept a close watch on her, volunteering to go on errands with her and such. Then I told her I had to go to Phoenix on short notice, but would only be gone 2 to 3 nights. Sure enough, she set up a date while I was gone. So, I faked a trip to the airport and checked into a local hotel with the plan of showing up at the house 20 minutes before her date was supposed to show up. I got to the house and let myself in and found her getting ready. She was shocked to say the least. I showed her the videos and said I knew everything and we were done. She pleaded with me to stay and work things out. She promised to change and said how ashamed she was. I told her she would have to cut all contact with the guys she had hooked up with. and if anything like this ever happened again, I would be out the door. I said she needed to make a list of who she slept with and when. If she wasn't completely honest, I would know, and we were done. We also had to go to couples counseling to get to the root of why she cheated. In the meantime, I contacted her 3 affair partners in person and showed each of them a short video clip featuring them. I said they needed to block all contact with my wife, even so much as a text or call. I would find out and send those clips and text messages to their families, friends, and co-workers. We did the therapy, and things were better for almost a year. One thing I never told her was how I found out and that I could still read her texts and emails. Trust but verify. She started a conversation with a guy, trading nudes and sexting, falling back into her old habits. I set up another fake trip, and she set up another date at our house. This time, I waited down the street in a rental car and watched the guy walk into my house. I walked in on him in the bedroom with my cell phone recording. I started cursing and yelling at the top of my lungs. It scared both of them, and they jumped up. She was crying, and he was trying to get his pants back on. He ran out, and I went in to confront my wife. I told her we were done, and she needed to leave. She pleaded with me and promised to make it up to me. I said she had 48 hours to confess to her parents and friends how she threw away our marriage before I started sending out her video highlight reels to everyone. I tracked her new affair partner down and sent their text messages and the cell phone footage to his wife. Betty has called me several times. She is in panic mode. Her new affair partner has told her about his wife getting my email package. Betty is begging for mercy and for me to stop. At this point, I just want to sit back and watch the world burn. I showed my evidence to my best friend and his wife. He said to move on, but his wife is siding with my darker side. She said to expose all her partners and go scorched earth. I'm torn right now as I realize I'm still in pain and just want to lash out. So, I might not be making wise decisions. The one thing I do know is I don't want her to spend this breakup into being my fault. On Tuesday morning, I got a call at work from Betty, and she is in shock. She just got served the divorce papers. Kudos to my lawyer for expediting that. She says she understands but wants to talk things out. I have spent the last couple of days in a hotel, but I told her we could talk when I came home. She said it felt like her life was coming apart at the seams. She got a call from our pastor's wife saying it would be best if she resigned from the committee she was on at our church. 3 out of 4 of her affair partners have contacted her about having their lives blown up. 2 are confused because they followed my suggestions. They cut all contact with her in exchange for my silence. Her best friend called her crying because she and her husband were fighting after I talked to them the other night. I asked if she had told her family or any of our friends yet, and she said just a few. I said I would be reaching out to them soon to let them know if she hadn't. She swears she still loves me and wants to stay with me. I told her I should have left her when I found out she cheated the first time. I told her I had copies and read every email and text she had sent or received for the last 3 years, along with her Snapchat, so I knew everything. All the conversations and all the trading of pictures and videos, even the ones she thought she had deleted. I said there is no way I could trust you, and without trust, there could be no future or love. The only thing left for us to do together is divorce and go our separate ways. Updates in the comments. I made my wife write out a timeline of who and when she cheated on me. Turns out there were 6 guys, 3 of whom she only saw once or twice. The first guy she hooked up with was one I got on tape. I sent out info to all the wives this morning, and I got a call back from one of them within minutes. She asked a lot of questions and said she had suspected him before but just never could prove it. She thanked me for giving her what she needed. The newest affair partner was removed from his house and charged with domestic battery. He called me to give me a piece of his mind and made a few threats. Another user said even with everything that's happened, your soon-to-be ex-wife is still looking out for her affair partner. The app replied, no, when she wanted me to stop and ask for mercy, it was for herself. She realized I was going to do what I told her I would do, and she didn't want her friends and family to see all the evidence. Her affair partner was already burned and kicked out of his house. Another Opus comment, all the affair partners' wives have been informed already, along with other people associated with them, including a few key members of our church. Betty's 48 hours have passed, and I will start trickling out the truth to our friends and family. I saw her best friend out last night and confronted her about why she didn't say anything to me about Betty's affairs. To me, she denied any knowledge of. And I asked her husband if he knew, to which she also denied. So, I sent the email chain between Betty and her friend to the husband, where his wife was envious and supportive of Betty's cheating. A user asked how you cloned the phone. The Opus replied, my wife is not very tech-savvy, so when she got a new phone last year, she had me set it up. So, I had her Apple ID and password. It was simple enough to wipe my iPad and restore from her iCloud account. and then to sync her texts, emails, and a few other apps to iCloud on both devices. As far as letting this go, I am done, just waiting on the divorce and closing this chapter of my life. My attorney wasn't happy when I told him about the videos earlier this week. He said the affair partners might be the only thing to worry about. As far as my wife, he said that can be handled if it comes to that. He said he could argue that they were home security cameras. Either way, he said not to worry too much about it. He has dealt with this before. Another user said, "Okay, I am fully supportive, but you might want to ask your attorney if publishing your nudes and videos is considered revenge porn or not. That can be a serious charge in some states." The app replied, "We've talked about that. It's a misdemeanor, 1 year and or $1,000. But he said I don't fit the criteria for the statute. Even if I were charged, he said the most I would get was the fine. But in my state, adultery is a felony and carries a 5-year and or $500 fine. And we have messages and videos to prove it. It's rarely prosecuted, but he has the juice with the local law to at least get them charged, if not prosecuted, which will deter them from pressing charges or filing a lawsuit." Another user expressed concerns about the level of exposure, stating that it's horrible that somebody cheated, but trying as hard as you can to destroy her for this puts you on the same level as her. The app replied, "I did not send graphic pictures to anyone in my church with the exception of one of our friends that goes there and the deacon's wife. I did send text messages and her timeline of the affair to a few church members, including my pastor's wife. I felt since she was on the committee with my wife, she should know as well. I know the deacon's wife shared some pictures with a few people, possibly the pastor's wife and a couple of others. But that is still my church. True, I have no desire to waste any more of my life with my future ex-wife. She destroyed my life not once but twice and lied to my face for at least 2 years. All I did was shine a bright light on her infidelity. I made nothing up nor exaggerated any fact. The only one guilty of destroying her life is her. I wasn't going to let her spin our divorce as something that was my fault." In answer to another user, the app stated the opposite. "There used to be a time in the world when marriage vows meant something, and married couples were faithful to each other. Making everything public means controlling the narrative about the reasons for the divorce and keeping my wife from spinning it into me being the bad guy. Here, there was a time when I did love her, but the pain she inflicted negated that feeling. I didn't make up or exaggerate any of the details I spread. So, if she is humiliated by everyone knowing the decisions she made, maybe she should have made better decisions. As far as telling the other people who were cheated on, they deserve to know the truth, and that their health could be at risk or that their partner was sleeping with an adulteress. So, I am dealing with my house as I see fit, and I am informing those parties that I want to know the truth. I never sent the info I have to any minor, nor are there any kids involved in this debacle. She is the one that threw away the last 6 years of our life and hurt me not once but twice. So, why should she get to walk away from this without sharing some of the pain and responsibility for her actions?" I recently became the victim of my wife's infidelity 2 years ago, and it totally destroyed my family. I'm a 31-year-old male, and my wife is a 27-year-old. For this, I will refer to my wife as Dedra and to myself as Dave. We have 2 kids, a daughter aged 4 and a son aged 2. I'll call them Sammy and Timmy. We got married nearly 6 years ago. I'm not going to get specific about my line of work, but let's just say I have a good job. My wife and I met in her final semester of college, and we got married 13 months later. She followed me to the East Coast where I worked for 4 years, and where our kids were born. Earlier in the year, I was given a promotional opportunity to run one of our offices located within 15 minutes of both our hometowns. Dedra and I were excited to move back home, especially after having kids, and our parents were overjoyed. Both my parents and her mother still live in the area, as does my younger brother. Dedra's dad passed away before I met her. Our families were, of course, excited to have the 2 of us back home, but were really excited about being able to see their grandkids on the regular. As things worked out, my mom and dad had recently moved into a new home in a 55-plus community, and were planning to keep our family home and rent it out for income. Our family home is a historic structure, and is just a beautiful place, sitting on over 3 acres of land with a small creek flowing through the wooded lot on the back of the property. Instead of buying a house, Dedra and I decided to move into the family home and pay rent to my mom and dad. My parents wanted to keep the home in the family and pass it down to me and my brother, and they'd like us to do the same. My parents and brother didn't want the rent money, but I insisted since my dad recently retired and was counting on the rent money for income. Paying them rent was like paying myself. Anyway, since my parents are leaving everything to me and my little brother. Okay, like I said, This house is very special to my family, and my parents treated it with great TLC over the years, but there were a few things that needed to be done after we moved in. Since it is a historic home, it has unique fixtures and features that require specialization. My parents have been working with a local contracting company for the past 35 years who has done nearly all the major repair work on the house. One of their specialties is working on older homes, and they do a great job. So anyway, after getting a list of projects together, I called them and got an estimate. The owner came out and walked around the house with me. He's a great man and has built a great company. If you look at the reviews for this place online, they've got like an 82% 5-star rating, 16% 4 stars, and that's out of nearly 700 reviews. Most companies like this have review scores that average in the 3 range if they're lucky. So that tells you something about this outfit. A couple of weeks after getting the estimate, the company started the repairs. They moved quickly and always had the project area cleaned up at the end of the day. My wife and I were very pleased with their work and professionalism. The work was primarily done by 3 of their craftsmen, but one guy, in particular, completed most of the projects on our home. Let's call him Brock for this posting. Brock was a very personable and polite guy who was about my age. My daughter referred to Brock as the window man as she saw him through our second-story windows while he was working out on the ladder. All repairs were completed on time, and we were now settled in at the house. My wife and kids loved the place, and I loved my new job. Everything was going well until I had an innocent conversation with my daughter. My wife had gone shopping with her mom and my mom, and I was watching the kids. We were playing out back, and my daughter was running all over the place. When she got tired, she jumped up on my lap. We were just talking generally, and then, out of the blue, she looked at me and said, "I saw Mommy napping with the window man." Now, before we go any further, let me state that my daughter is a highly gifted child. I know all parents feel that way about their kids, but with her, it's true. She is highly gifted. Everyone who meets her immediately recognizes it. Her doctors recognized it, and we had her tested before we moved, and she scored one of the highest scores the clinic had ever seen for a 4-year-old. So, I knew what she was telling me was very likely factual, although there was a possibility this could have been something she made up, as she does have a remarkable imagination. I was shocked and asked her to repeat it, and she told me the same thing she just said. I asked her to tell me what happened and how she saw them. She said, "My wife put Timmy and her down for their afternoon nap. Sammy said Timmy dropped his binky behind his bed and was crying for her to get it, but she couldn't reach it, so she went looking for her mom. I asked her if she called Mommy, and she said, no. She said she walked over to our bedroom door and opened it and then called Mommy. I asked her what she saw, and she said, Mommy jumped up out of bed with a blanket wrapped around her and ran over and kissed her and then took her by the hand to get the binky and to tuck them back in. I said, where did you see the window man? She said he was lying on Daddy's side of the bed. Hearing this hurt so bad, but I didn't want to show emotion, so I said, he was. She said, yes. I then asked her what happened next. She said, Mommy left their bedroom, and I heard her talking with the window man, and they went outside. I asked her what she did next. Sammy said she got up and looked out the window and saw him driving his truck down the driveway. I gave her a big kiss and thanked her for telling me. She then said something that really broke me. She said, Mommy told her to SHH and let's keep this our secret, okay. I asked her what she said back to Mommy, and she said, I told Mommy, okay. Again, my little girl was smart, and somehow she sensed what she saw wasn't right. Again, I didn't want her to be upset, so I made light of the situation and said, thank you so much for telling me. I'm so proud of you. Now this can be our secret, okay? She said, okay, I won't tell Mommy I told you. Then she said, Daddy, don't tell Mommy I told you. And I told her, there's no way this is our secret. I then tickled her to break the mood, and we started laughing and talking about something else. I could tell the secret my wife asked her to keep was really upsetting my daughter, and after telling me, I think she felt relieved. My wife came home with our moms, and to our surprise, she showed me a gift she bought for Sammy. It was a gift Sammy picked out for her birthday, which is not until October. I asked why she bought it now, and she said she wanted to give it to her now. This was surprising as Sammy wasn't asking about this gift and was not expecting it until her birthday. Also, my wife and I have a clear understanding with Sammy of when she will get large gifts. She knows it's only on her birthday and Christmas, and she accepts this. Like I said, she has never mentioned the gift again since she chose it a couple of months ago. My wife justified the purchase, saying she's such a great kid and has been so good lately. She wanted to reward her. I hope you're not mad. I told her I wasn't mad, but I immediately sensed this was a bribe of sorts for Sammy to keep my wife's secret. When my wife gave Sammy the gift, Sammy was concerned and said, I wasn't supposed to get this until my birthday. What am I going to get then? Dedra told Sammy, "You've been such a good girl. Mommy and Daddy want to give you this now." Sammy surprisingly said, "No, I want to keep it until my birthday. I don't want it now." My wife kept coaxing her to open it, but Sammy didn't want to and looked at me for backing. I spoke up and told Sammy, "Let's take this upstairs and put it in your closet." My wife was stunned by Sammy's reaction, but it didn't surprise me. Like I said, she's very smart, and she didn't want that gift until her birthday. We took the gift upstairs to her closet, and she seemed relieved not to have to open it. When Sammy and I came back downstairs, my dad and brother had arrived, so we spent the rest of the day eating and enjoying family time. I was going through the motions and having fun with my family, but my mind was preoccupied with what Sammy told me. Later that night, I was going to confront my wife but decided not to, since if what Sammy said was true, my wife would likely deny it. Instead, I told my wife I needed to wake up early Sunday morning to do some work for my company using our home computer. She was fine with this and asked if I wanted her to get up with me to keep me company, and I told her no. When I woke up, I did a complete check on our home computer, and there was nothing. Then I went on her phone and entered her password, and again, nothing. I thought to myself, did Sammy make this whole thing up? She could have, but her details were too descriptive not to be true. The rest of the day, we spent over at my parents', visiting with my aunt and uncle who had flown in from out of town. I hadn't seen them in over 2 years, so it was good to visit with them and to introduce them to Timmy, who they had not yet met. We had a great day, and everything appeared to be normal with Dedra. She was her ever-loving self and showed no signs of anything. I returned to work on Monday, but the thought of what Sammy told me was still on my mind. So several times during the day, I drove over past my home to alleviate my suspicion. I did the same thing on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday. There was nothing, but I just had a strong feeling Sammy was right. I thought of hiring a private investigator, but instead, I decided to buy a camera system at Best Buy. I installed the camera system when Dedra and Sammy were out attending an evening event at our local nature center, and I was home watching Timmy. I placed a camera outside near the garage, looking down the driveway, a second camera in the living room, and the third camera in our master bedroom. I placed each camera where they could not be seen unless your eyes somehow stumbled upon them. I was concerned, however, that my wife may notice the camera in our bedroom, though it was up on the crown molding and completely blended in, as our crown molding is white with black trim. It was in sight if you were laying on your back looking straight at it. I turned the system on when I left for work every day and turned it off before I arrived home, since my wife and kids don't spend much time in the living room, our bedroom, or on the driveway during the day. They did not set the cameras off much. When the cameras are triggered, I receive a text alert. Everything was normal until the following Tuesday at 1:46 p.m. when I got an alert from the driveway unit. When I checked, I saw a truck from the contracting company coming up the driveway. I then saw Brock get out, walk up to my front door, open it, and go in. I next got an alert from the living room camera, and there I saw my wife kissing Brock. Worst fears confirmed, Sammy was right. With this, I rushed out to my car and started heading toward my house. On the way, I called my mom and told her what was happening and asked her to meet me at my house as soon as possible. My brother, aunt, and uncle were also there, and I told her to bring them on the way over. I spoke with them on the phone. By this time, I had gotten an alert from the bedroom and knew what was likely happening there. I was really upset but held it together, giving instructions to my family. I told my mom and aunt I wanted them to take the children outside when I confronted Dedra. I then asked my uncle and brother if they could accompany me in my bedroom when I confronted Dedra. I explained I wanted them as witnesses and to prevent me from doing something violent. They readily agreed. We parked on the driveway down from the house, blocking Brock's truck in, and walked up to the front door. The door was unlocked, and we all entered the house. Our bedroom is on the back of the house, so there was no chance the cheater saw or heard us approaching. I led the way, with my brother and uncle right behind me, and my mom and aunt behind him. The noise from the bedroom drowned out any noise we were making walking up the stairs and down the hall to the bedroom. My heart was beating out of my chest at this point. I motioned for my mom and aunt to go past us to the kids' room. I then looked at my uncle and brother and asked if they were ready, and they nodded yes. And with that, I opened the door and walked in. My wife screamed, "Oh no, oh my God," and with that, Brock dismounted and fell back on the floor, started apologizing, and reaching for his clothes. I had my phone out and was filming and said nothing. I just stood there in silence, moving my phone camera back and forth. Brock continued apologizing and getting dressed, while my wife had the sheets pulled up to her face and was crying, saying, "This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to hurt you, Dave. I love you so much. I'm so sorry." After a couple of minutes, Brock was fully dressed and sat on the floor with his hands covering his face, continuing to apologize, while my wife kept crying and apologizing. I told Brock to get the F out, and he quickly left. Before leaving, I told him, "Don't think about taking your truck. We have it blocked in, and I will be calling the company to come and pick it up." I then called my mother-in-law and explained to her what just happened and told her to come over and pick up her daughter. My wife was still laying in the bed under the covers, pleading with me not to make her go. I ignored her. My mother-in-law arrived shortly thereafter, and when she did, my uncle, brother, and I left the bedroom. I then heard my mother-in-law yelling at my wife as she sobbed. To my surprise, my wife left the house without incident. When she left, she rushed out with her head down, crying and didn't say anything. I think she was in a total state of shock and was also highly embarrassed. My mother-in-law apologized to me, gave me a big hug and kiss, and told me she loved me. After they left, I went out back to see my kids and then called the contracting company. After I explained the reason for my call, they put me through to the owner's cell phone. He apologized profusely and said he would see to it that his company did everything they could to make this up to me. I thanked him and ended the call. About an hour later, the company dropped by with someone to pick up the truck. Brock was nowhere in sight. The following Monday, I took the day off and met with a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. I also secured an attorney from the same firm to handle the situation with the contracting company. While I respect the owner and the company he's built, I want to receive some level of compensation for the damage their employee inflicted on me and my family. From that day, I didn't speak a word to my wife. She's called and texted me nonstop, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, and asking me for a second chance. But that's not happening. Against the advice of my attorney, I've moved all my wife's stuff out and had my brother and a friend of his tie it to her mother's house. The way I got things working was that my wife and her mom come to my house at 6:30 a.m. Her mom comes in, and my wife waits in the car until I leave for the office. Then she goes in. I work until 5 and then head out to grab dinner at a restaurant and then come home at 6:30 p.m. My wife and her mother have dinner with the kids before I arrive back home. When I'm about 5 minutes out from the house, I call my mother-in-law to advise her. My wife then goes out to the car while her mom stays in the house with the kids. When I arrive, I ignore my wife sitting in the car and go straight into the house. I'd usually talk to my mother-in-law for a few minutes to recap the day before she leaves. I then spend the next 12 hours with my kids and repeat the cycle 7 days a week. I know this may seem extreme to some, but I wanted nothing to do with my wife. If I could, I would have banned her from ever seeing my kids again, but I know that wasn't happening. I had extreme anger for what she did to me. The fact she had a strange man in my bed while my kids were in the next room, then instructed my daughter to lie for her. That is beyond forgiveness to me. I instructed my lawyer to go for full custody, but she said we would not likely win that, especially with me working so many hours. When I first saw the attorney, she told me that my wife would likely get some visitation but no more than every other weekend. She also told me that alimony would likely not be awarded unless my wife could prove I was the cause for her adultery. I would never do anything to jeopardize my professional reputation and livelihood. And just for the record, I was faithful to my wife the entire time we were married. In the meantime, I've also decided to sell the house, as it's got too many bad memories and my wife. So I had it appraised, and it came back with a value that was nearly double what we paid for it. My parents were shocked at the valuation, as they had not appraised it since they bought it over 30 years ago. My brother and I will split the proceeds from the sale 50-50, as was always my parents' intent. We will also sell my parents' house, and my brother will take half of that. So when it's all said and done, my brother will have a significant amount of cash, which will allow him to buy a house of his own. I'll be left with a little over $2 million in the bank. I don't want my money tied up in real estate. I was always a financial planner who did well managing my own money, but I plan on seeking out the services of a financial advisor to help me manage my assets. I want to make sure I have money put aside for my children's education and to make sure my family is taken care of. As for my wife, she will eventually have her own place and be responsible for paying her own bills. I had my attorney draft a proposal stating the minimum amount of support I would provide to her for a maximum of 3 years. It's more than fair, but that's all she will get from me. I won't provide her a dime more than what's legally required. I told my attorney to make it very clear to her that once the divorce is finalized, I don't ever want to see her face again. I will do whatever it takes to make sure she can't get any of my money, and I'm determined to do that. So here we are, just waiting for the wheels of justice to turn, as my wife's attorney has now said they will counter with a proposal of their own. I'm hoping this will end soon so I can get my life back to normal, and not have to see my wife again. I don't believe in second chances when it comes to cheating, and there is no going back from what my wife did. I'm writing this posting for a couple of reasons. The first is as a warning to others to be aware, and make sure they know their partner. I'm not sure there were signs with my wife. Everything seemed great, and I was madly in love with her. I guess that's what made this such a shock. The second is therapy for myself. Writing this out and getting feedback has helped me a lot. I have a great support system in my family, and my parents have been amazing. My friends are also great. They all say I'm handling this situation well, and with dignity. My brother also said he doesn't know how I'm doing it, but I know I have to. My kids need me, and I have to be strong for them. So that's what keeps me going. If you liked it,